All right.
We'll get through it.
All right. All right. Here we go. We'll get this going. Here we go. Welcome to Inside the 18. I'm Michael Magid. I guess you can say happy holidays right now. It's already holiday time. With me, 99 World Cup winner Saskia Weber. No Omar Zini today because it's actually raining in Southern California and we don't know how to handle it. So they had to reschedule sessions for everybody out there. But that's okay because we're joined once again. You guys know her. You love her. The one and only CEO of the Keeper Institute, Jill Loyden, right off the field. We're getting her for that hour before she gets to her next session.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to have a good conversation with you guys.
I mean, we're always excited to have you on, Jill. I mean, honestly, you know, the work that you all do, I mean, we can't give any more praise. I mean, I think publicly, privately, we just consistently just heart praise on all of you guys. But, you know, why don't you kind of catch up? Some people might not be familiar with kind of what you all have been up to lately, because there's been a lot of exciting things going on at TKI.
Yes, we are a training company in New Jersey, and we have our own indoor training facility in Sewell, New Jersey. And what we do is essentially we help goalkeepers take their next step, and whatever that looks like. You might be at the youth grassroots level, or in the college game, or even in the professional game. And really, our aim is to create an environment where everyone feels safe to try and expand their game.
You know, and I think, you know, that's Saskia, that's something that really, I love the fact that Jill just said that right there, because I love the fact that you said to expand their game, not to show how great we are as a facility,
Yeah,
as some people out there try to do, right? But it's all about, you know, their own personal growth development, which I think is one of those things that's, you know, really fascinating about being an independent, you know, program as opposed to being a, you know, associated with a club type of a thing.
Yeah, I think we're in a unique arena, because I think a big roadblock for players is when they're in their team environment feeling that competition. And even for like the most elite goalkeepers, they're competing but still part of a team. And so I even remember in my own game, like when I was competing with another goalkeeper, I was not really open to being weak or working on my weaknesses in front of other goalkeepers that I was competing with. And so therefore I was never really ready when it came to the game to deal with the mental side of those weaknesses, because I wasn't prepared, because I was always spending my time hiding my weaknesses. Where at TKI, it's no judgment. We're not making any decisions on who's going to play. And it's simply like, hey, let's get the ball out there and work on some areas that you need to feel more confident in. And what do you need some more education on, or what do you need more repetitions on? And this is a safe space to fail.
I think that also, I mean, the fact, number one, you have your own facility and everything that highlights goalkeepers is incredible. You know, especially out here in California, just that alone is it's a hard hurdle to get over. Field space, this, that, the other, competing with other coaches that aren't doing the same thing, field players on the field, the whole 9 yards, just to be able to bring somebody in where the entire focus is on strengthening their weaknesses and highlighting their strengths in goalkeeping, being surrounded by that mentality, seeing other goalkeepers train is incredible. And like, bring it here. Like, bring it here. I'm like at Roxbury Park looking over my shoulder to see if like the security guard's gonna come and kick me off. He used to be like, "Hey, you can't have that many balls and cones. It can't look like you're training." I'm like, I'm training my niece. I'm like, she's here visiting.
Yeah.
See, that's the whole thing. See, the whole trend has been for minimal equipment now in training, and everyone's like, oh, you've just been really paying attention to the notes from all these elite coaches. It's like, no, I don't want to get kicked off a field. So like,
yeah, like I can't haul out like a bunch of dummies and stuff out of my car.
Yeah, I mean, we've been there, done that. I mean, I used to live right behind a soccer field, and one time I got my lawnmower out and mowed the lawn of the soccer field and tried to compete on it, and I got in so much trouble. So have our unique hurdles here in our indoor facility because it is, rather small, but we make the best of the situation, and we have a place that we can train 24/7. So
Exactly.
we're lucky in that capacity.
I think one of the things, Jill, that's really cool about what you all do is that you guys have obviously your ongoing programs, and obviously the reason we wanted to have you on today is because we're going to talk about the topic of running these seasonal programs and everything like that. But you guys all have done a really good job of blending your ongoing programs with these clinics, these ID camps, these instructional workshops, all the winter clinic, all these sorts of things, indoor, outdoor, and a lot of people out there think that you either run a camp or you run an ongoing, and you can't really do the two. But you guys have found a way to have real synergy, which I love.
Yeah, I think if you keep at the forefront of your plan, player development and individual player development. So even though we're training in a small group of 6, we're still there for that individual that came there that day. I think when you can keep that at the forefront of what you're doing, then players can develop and they can feel competent in terms of they're improving, and they can feel like they're part of a group of people who are all trying to improve together, and they can learn. And I think that's exactly why people come and want to work with us, because they leave feeling a little bit more knowledgeable, a little bit more empowered, maybe even more confident, or just more educated in the position.
Yeah. And I think that's something that I, for a lack of a better term, it seems like, I don't know if it's just me out there. I mean, I know there are certain places, shout out to Joe, with Impact Goalkeeper and other programs out there, but it seems like that's a very East Coast Suskia thing, is having these kind of these independent growth programs. I know obviously, there's, Blodgett and people that you grew up with, out there, but it just seems like there was just more of a focus on that. And out here, it's all club related. I don't know. Maybe I'm kind of grasping at straws here. I don't know.
It is really club related out here, but I think it comes back to what I said. It's the accessibility of things out here, and people don't like being stepped on toes out here. I think it's really strange. You have battles with different clubs over different field space and everything. I think the thing I loved about Jersey and about the type of system that was out there and that you have is you're training multiple goalkeepers at the same time. And here I think you find more with the privates and stuff like that. It's one-on-one, which is fine, but I like having multiple goalkeepers. I think around the same age, around the same level, because I think you learn off of other people as well. And so you learn by watching what somebody's doing wrong, what somebody's doing right, and I can only kick so much at somebody and stuff, but I like that dynamic of having at least, like, if you have 6 goalkeepers, I think that's great. I think it's very rare you see that out here. Like, I know I think the max I have is 2, and they're brother and sister. You know what I mean? Like I think that, like, in Omar, you'll see him training and he'll have like maybe 3 at the most, but that's rare.
Yeah.
I do think that there are great clubs here in New Jersey, and they all have great goalkeeper coaches, and we're here because when I was growing up, I didn't have that. I lived really far away from anything that could provide me goalkeeper training. And so the only time I got consistent goalkeeper training was when I went to ODP practice, which was like 1 time per week. And so that's why we started TKI, and we're not here to compete with what your coach is telling you to do. We're just here. If you want to come train with us, we want to help you. And we're not, coercing anyone to come here or telling anybody that we have magic dust. We're just here because we can provide a supplemental outside third opinion potentially.
No, agreed.
Yeah, and by the way, shout out to James. I'm probably going to butcher this. Loyden. How's your French, Sus? Bill, how's your French? Shout out for James in Canada right now. I really like your show. You guys are doing a great job. Oh, that's very, very kind of you. Thank you, James. We appreciate it. Who else is doing a great job? TKI. So, Jill, before we kind of get in today's topic, why don't you just do a little shameless little plug for what you guys have coming on this winter?
Yeah, I mean, basically everything that we have is sold out. So if you're not already signed up, I know somebody, but I'm not sure I can get you in. But we do have some high school camps, we have some college camps, we have consistent drop-in for college kids all winter long. So November, December, and January, 3 times per week, which is one of my favorite things that we do. And we also get to work with some really amazing professionals. So we have like a couple day things you can come to, or consistent over a long period of time training opportunities.
That's awesome. I need a jump.
Yeah.
I'm like,
you want to head back? You want to head back?
I'm like, right now I'm just in limbo. I need a job. Do you hear me, Bruins? What's going on?
Yeah, things are a little topsy turvy, but obviously shout out to Amanda for getting that job in Orlando. That's going to be awesome for her.
Super proud of her. So
I'm very, very excited. So let's delve into this topic, Jill, because I know you have some pros and also some developing goalkeepers that you got to get to later today. And that's the thing about Jill. She's doing the pros. She's doing the young ones. She's an educator, a universal educator. And speaking of that, let's talk about the topic of working these seasonal camps and everything like that. And today's topic, guys, is putting together either winter programs or short burst programs type of thing. What do we mean, Joe, by like a seasonal program?
Well, for example, I think right now we're working with some really incredible professional athletes where we get to work with them 3 times per week in their off season. And that's a time for us to really hone in on some of the areas that they want to continue to improve. So we paint a lot of pictures, and always tactical decision making is at the forefront. But even today, we tried to break a specific thing down that some of our goalkeepers need to work with. So like maybe pushing for those reaction saves that are a little bit more up here. And we tried to break that down, and it was an epic fail. And, I think I'm not egotistical, and I don't need to say that everything we do is perfect. It was an epic fail. I'd planned something. It didn't go well. The goalkeeper struggled with it, and we're back to the drawing board. But I think that is something that I appreciate about doing those long-term plans, is that there are days like that where it's not going to look great, and we're going to try things and it's not going to work. And that's okay. That's the game, because, progress is not linear. It is, we're going to take a couple steps forward, a couple steps back. And that's why I really enjoy those long-term stints that I get to work with people, because it's just a long-term process. And if we can stay committed to that and putting the forefront of, our plan in action, and if it doesn't always execute, that's okay. But there's a method behind the madness for those long-term things. And the short-term things is, people come maybe for a 2-day clinic or a 2-day camp because they live far away and they want to get their most bang for their buck staying here overnight. And so they train for, 2-3 days for 10 hours. And at that point, we make the topics really broad. So maybe it is protecting the goal from wide areas and like those half spaces. And we paint the pictures, and then in between repetitions, we maybe give them some ideas and some guidelines and help them to discover their own strengths so that they can make decisions in alignment to what works best for them.
I love one of the things you said right there, Jill, and this, Saskia, this is a conversation that you've had as well too. When it comes to these, whether it's a showcase camp or a small, a time period, a small duration that you're working with somebody, if you get into specifics, you can't really get into specifics, because you've got a lot of times at these programs you've got, and Saskia, this, you've got goalkeepers at different levels of development. So if you try to make it so specific towards one goalkeeper, it might hinder the development of the old goalkeeper. So is that something, Saskia, that you've also tried to do, is just find, like, let me paint a general picture that everyone's going to kind of benefit from in these couple days, and they can take back to their club?
Yeah, and I think that's what's important, is what can they take back with them? I think in the short term, like 2-day camp, even 1-day ID camp, stuff like that, you want to have a broad picture. You want to see as much of the goalkeeper as you can in all different situations, and be able to give kind of broad coaching points that they can take back with them, because they're not, like you said, Jill, some are coming from far away. They're getting the most bang for their buck, but what are they taking home with them? What can they do when they're not with you, and not 3 days a week for 3 months, which would be amazing.
Because sometimes when you're working with your college goalkeepers, you see them every day, and sometimes you might miss something because you're seeing the same thing every day. You might not see improvement here or a little tweak there. And so That's also, but I think that what we try to do is we don't just say like let's just throw a random bunch of stuff at the wall and see what sticks. It's
Right.
super intentional to this age and stage. These are the areas that we see that goalkeepers are generally having the most trouble with. So transition from protect the space to protect the goal. How do we manage that situation? Solving pressure is the biggest one. Goalkeepers have a difficult time with that because it's emotional. They're super wrapped up in like, what if I make a mistake? So we give them just maybe a couple tools. Hey, this is a way that you can solve pressure. Let's work on it in this environment, because this is something that we see a lot of goalkeepers
Right.
at the youth level struggle with. So it is a little bit broader, but it's super intentional at the same
Right.
time.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. And then when you
Yeah.
get into the long-term ones, again, then you can, I look at it kind of like, I look at it like the COVID preseason. Like last fall, when it was basically the longest preseason in the history of the world. We could really focus and break down the individual goalkeeper, and from session to session build on that and have a long-term goal. And then once we got into season and short stuff, then it's a little broader, and you're dealing with situations more that, whether it's like something you're seeing consistently in a game and so on and so forth, you have to taper the goalkeeper and everything like that. But when you have those long-term things, it's really great to be able to build a program from point A to point B and slowly get there. And I agree with you. I have put stuff out there and it's just been a mess. But it has just been like the worst sessions ever. And I'm like, oh, this worked in my head.
Yeah.
But that's good for that's good for us as coaches as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. My favorite thing is always like when the parents are standing there and they're just like, well, they're like, we drove an hour and a half. Does this guy know what he's doing right there? It's like, get me another session, guys. Get me another session. Give me 10 minutes. Let me reset everything.
Yeah. I also think it's okay for training to look really messy and for kids not to quote unquote get it. Because if you make it so that it is perfect or it looks good, as soon as the goalkeepers leave our door, they're going to start forgetting what they actually learned and what they worked on. And so if they just start forgetting that technique, it's not going to be as beneficial than if you ask them questions and get them to think about the answers, and they're going to learn quicker and have a deeper learning, which will ultimately translate to longer lasting memory, or quote unquote muscle memory, so that they're relying on their instincts and not having to think.
Yeah, I want to bring this up right now, Jill, because you're talking about messy, and I think one of the things that really happens when we're talking about these programs is that sometimes they can get messy because of the short amount of time it takes to plan these out. And I think a lot of coaches out there kind of slap these things together. They go, oh, there's a 2-week break between high school soccer and club soccer during the Christmas time. Well, okay, let me put a clinic together, and then they just kind of basically they do a glorified group session, and it's a disaster. So what are some of the variables that these coaches have to kind of take into consideration before they put something like together?
Yeah, well, I don't mean I know you know this, but like I don't mean messy from a term perspective of like unorganized. Yeah. But sessions can be if you're not organized, and even if you're organized and you have a session plan, if your coaching points are here and your coaching points are there, and then you give feedback the next round on something different, and now you have like ADD of your feedback, then it's going to look super messy, because then the goalkeeper is so confused. Are they giving me feedback on my shoulders or my feet? Do they want me to come there? Do they want me to stay? It says that to me is super messy. And I'm okay if the kids are, the exercise look messy because they're actually trying to do something intentional and different than what they've done before, where they might not exactly quite nail it perfect 10 out of 10 times, but they're getting it a few times out of 10, or they're making strides, or they're making different mistakes because they're trying to tweak things here and there. That's right. Okay with me. I'm also, I'm okay from a perspective of things looking a little bit messy if I let the goalkeepers serve on each other sometimes on certain reps, because they're also developing and learning and learning how to use their feet and serve different balls using different parts of their feet. And that's okay to me. And so, yeah, that's kind of what I mean by messy.
No,
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. I totally meant that. I was kind of more. It was a weird segue. It was a weird transition because I was like, speaking of messy, I was like, here's a great way to put this in right there, and you're like, yeah, but that's going to be kind of counterintuitive to what I was saying right there.
Yeah. Also, messy in terms of oh, now I forgot my point, Mike. I was going to say
job, Mike.
I'll remember. Going. I'll remember.
Okay. Well, James here has a question. So let's throw this up here right here. So shout out to James in Canada. And he goes, I'm building a GK trading program right now. We are in off season and I have no access to the players. So they will have to train dry TRG at a distance. If they would have 3 sessions, what would those sessions comprise of? So I think he's trying to help them put together training sessions from a distance for when they go off.
Like COVID distance or?
See, yeah, that James, if you could be a little more specific on what you mean by that in the chat, and then we'll kind of get back to it. But
I mean, if you're putting together, James, if they have no access to another coach and they're just solo on their own, you have to put a program together, depending on how many goalkeepers you have, on like if we go back to COVID time, on what their environment is as well. What do they have access to? Some of them might have access to a field and this and that and the other. Others might have access to a gym. Like, so it becomes a little more specific in a sense. You can have a broad session across the board when it comes to handling footwork and stuff. But I think that you're going to have to find out if you're saying that you don't have access to them but they have access to a gym. So you're going, they're all over the country, so I don't have access to them, but they have access to gym. So a gym as in like a basketball gym with walls and stuff, or a gym as in like weights. So I think like it's a broad question that we can get, we don't have enough time to get into specifics. We can but
I think, James, what you need to do is you need to hire TKI as a consulting firm to help you put together the proper indoor facility in Canada, right there for your goalkeepers to come and train at. But that does bring up something, Jill, is that there's a lot of people out there who try to run winter programs and they don't have access to what you have there, a full-time indoor facility. And the weather is something you have to take into consideration this time of year.
Yeah, the colder it is, the less standing time that you want for the goalkeepers. And so you have to organize something that majority of your goalkeepers are engaged in doing something, because if not, they're going to get cold and it's going to be a whole to do. But the way that we kind of structure ours is first we take a step back and we try to figure out who's coming to our clinics and who's coming to our camps and what age and stage are they, what do they need? And then we start like, what moments of the game do we want to influence? And then break that down even further. What intended outcomes do we want in those moments of the game? What organization do we need? Do we need dummies? Do we need grids? And then from there, what are we looking for? So maybe we're working on protecting the space. And so we're looking for certain shapes, or we're looking for certain blocking or spread shapes. And then what are the common errors that we usually see when we're working with that age and stage? And how can we maybe ask questions to get to the answer that we need to get to, or how do we progress or regress the exercise so that the students can find the right amount of challenge with it.
I
love what you just said. Go ahead, Sus.
One point back to James. James, when you do structure something that somebody's doing on their own, you have to make sure they're using proper technique. So one of the biggest flaws in sending a kid off to train by themselves, whether it's in a gym against a wall or whatever it is, if they're just doing the wrong technique, they're just doing it on their own and reinforcing the wrong technique. So it's very imperative that whatever you set up for them, that their technique is proper. Else they're going to come back and they've done something wrong for the past 2 months or 3 months, and you have to reteach. And so that's just a point.
No, that's a really good point. And I think that kind of, Jill, that kind of gets back to a lot of people watch TKI sessions online and they go, this looks awesome, let me do this. But they never asked you questions on why you were doing this, what the context of it was, what the level of these goalkeepers was, yada, yada, yada. They watch Betos and Kalen doing a session, and they go out there with their 9s and they try to run that same session. but it's the same thing as sending the kid out there, showing
Mm-hmm.
them kid a couple drills and then having them go out there, but there's no guidance whatsoever.
Yeah.
So I think it is important that even if you are doing some sort of solo training, that these kids do check in now and then and say,
And
hey,
even if you can have them film themselves going through some stuff, so because they're all over the country, so you can actually look to see if they're doing what you're asking for them properly.
Yeah.
I think that's a big part.
And sometimes I think that people underestimate limitations and they think, well, I can't do something because I don't have fill in the blank here. And I think sometimes the constraints that we have in our life really do bring out some different exploration. So, for example, you might not have access to an indoor facility, but you might have access to YouTube, and you can learn from clips, and you can design things for future or whatever. I just think sometimes people underestimate the constraints, and they don't realize that those constraints can help you be really creative to figure out different ways to develop.
No, absolutely. I want to talk about this because, one of the things that I've seen, at least that I've a mistake that I've made, and Suska, I don't know if you've seen this as well too, is that when it comes to mistakes I've made is
no, I was being sarcastic. Go ahead.
One of the mistakes I've made
You
is
asked if I've seen mistakes you've made, so that's what I was.
Well, we have the issue here in Southern California where high school soccer takes place in the winter. Obviously, you don't have that issue, Jill, in Jersey, but we have that issue here. And I've made the mistake of planning clinics or sessions that actually kind of make it detrimental because they're overtraining, because they're doing this while they're still playing high school soccer, which doesn't stop through the winter break. Siska, is that something that like you've, because I know that they, you have sometimes these ID camps and showcase camps that are going on during these times, and these kids are playing high school too. Like, do you kind of think about like, okay, ask them like, hey, did you play a game yesterday? Like, what did you do this week so that I'm not overdoing it with you?
Yeah, I think that, with the younger kids, and that comes in with high school because, they're actually not allowed to train with their club when they're in high school out here. They're not supposed to be. And so it opens up a little more time for you to train them. But I agree, this is something that you have to have a conversation with them, their parents. You don't want to be overtraining the kids. If it's just a weekend camp or a one-day camp, then that's not as big of a deal. I think you find it harder with the high school kids out here to get privates in and everything during that time. But that's just communication.
Yeah, which I think is really important. I think that communication on both sides is so massive, Jill. And I know you guys do a great job about that at TKI in regards to having that communication off the field, and then that also probably helps you cater these winter camps or small duration camps, is by the feedback you're getting from your consistent clients.
Yeah, feedback, and I think game footage is the best feedback for us. So we get to work with some really high level college goalkeepers when they come off of break in the months of, from Thanksgiving back to the New Year, and they're sending us their game film and looking at trends that they've given up over the season long. And we've tracked trends that we've seen over the course of an entire season in the SEC and the ACC. And for us, that's exactly how we design sessions is, all right, well, we're seeing these trends a lot. So a lot of goals from wide areas, from half spaces, and let's see if we can replicate that and provide an opportunity for you to make as many decisions as possible and explore your capabilities and what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are, and base those decisions off of that exploration.
Yeah, because they're going back into spring season. So
yeah. Yeah. And for us, it's like, yeah, we can work on some technique, obviously, but we want to pair that with decisions, because if we just work on technique, like I said,
right,
they're going to forget that when they go back to their college teams, right? But if you can help them to figure out, all right, what's my range here? How quick am I, and where are my strengths, and ask questions that get them to think a little bit more about the game, then that's the whole goal.
Yeah.
Jill, I have a question for you, because like one of the things I've seen with a lot of young goalkeepers is they'll go to, let's say, a 3-day program or something, let's say, during the Christmas break, and then they'll go back to their high school team, or in the summertime go back to their club team, and it's what they're doing at their club is completely foreign compared to what they were taught in these 3 days. Maybe again, as Phil always says, it's not about something being right or wrong, it's about different, and about being willing to be open-minded. But then they go back, they start doing things that are against what their coach wants, or then they start getting in their head and everything like that. Like, is there any advice that you can give players who, like, let's say maybe not a TKI, because I'm sure there's a very good cohesion with the clubs in your area, but let's say another program.
No,
hypothetically speaking.
No, this is actually a really good question, and something that Tori and I just did a podcast on. I don't know if we released it yet. I think maybe yesterday, but I had this parent call me, and he said his daughter's like 11 or 12, and she's in my academy, my juniors academy class. And he said, Jill, like, my daughter's going to goalkeeper training at her club, and her club goalkeeper coach is telling her something that's completely different. And she asked me, Dad, what do I do? Do I listen to my club goalkeeper coach? Do I listen to Jill from TKI? And he said to her, daughter, just listen to Jill. And I said, I appreciate you saying that, and I'm very flattered by how much you trust me. But that's not good advice, okay? Because your daughter's getting this information, and it's her job. I know she's just a young player, but it's her job to think about what works best in this scenario. It's her job to pick from this coach and that coach, and then put it all together for herself to be able to execute. There's nobody that has all the right answers. I don't have magic dust. I don't know everything. There are people out there who might have different opinions that might work for someone. Yeah. And so I said, the best thing that you can do to for your daughter is to ask her, well, what do you think?
Yeah.
And hear what she has to say, because then she has to think for herself. Well, I like what Coach X is telling me, but it doesn't work in this scenario, but it works in this scenario. But I like a little bit of what that coach is also telling me. Yeah. And then you're fostering an environment that your goalkeeper is autonomously thinking, which is the whole goal.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've had that problem too. And I think that one of the other absolutely totally solutions is what Jill said, but I think that one of the other things is to really have a conversation with that keeper and find out what this coach is saying. Like, and like, I was listening to one of my young keepers, Anna, and she was having the same problem, and I was just like, I had to kind of pick through what the goalkeeper coach or what the coach was saying to her, but I found like that gray area, and I kind of had to like re-explain it. Well, I understand what he's saying in this situation. And it wasn't that like I told her to do something one way and he was saying the other way. It was more situational. It was, I don't know if his delivery was right, and I understood what he was saying. So I kind of had to rework it and explain it to her. But again, you have to learn from multiple people and find what's best for you. And that is the biggest thing.
I have two more things to add about that before. One is, as a coach, it's our job to also honor and respect what another coach says. And Absolutely. I think that's really hard in our industry, because I don't know why, and I'm also guilty of this. There's a competitive nature amongst us all as coaches that I'm right and that my ideas are the right way. And there's this competition of like, they don't know what they're talking about, but I do. And we can't allow that to influence our behavior. And, it's silly anyway, because we're really not in a competition against anyone. We're here because we want to help kids, right? So it's important for us to curb our own thoughts about what we think about that, whatever that coach gave. Like, for example, a kid came in here and he said, my coach told me to never front smother. And I was like, okay, well, I disagree with that, but like, I was like, all right, well, let's kind of like break that down to think like, does that work for you? But it's so important for us to not negatively speak about other coaches, because then we give the players that we work with permission to say similar things about their coaches or other players, which is not right. So first we have to really gut check ourselves. Second thing is as play, we should encourage players that when they hear the word always or never, to challenge that line of thinking, because goalkeeping, there really isn't that many situations that are that black and white, that you always do this or you never do that. So when kids come to you and they say, well, my other coach told me to always get a ball that lands in the 6. Okay, let's unpack that. And let's talk about some context of when you can go for the ball when it's inside your 6, and maybe sometimes that you can't, right? So those would be my 2 suggestions.
I once had a kid.
Absolutely.
I was gonna say I once had a kid years back when I was coaching at a club, and he came out, and I said for him to, what is going on right here? Siri just came up for some second. Did anybody hear that? Was that just me? Okay. Yeah. All right. That was weird. I had a situation where a kid, it was coming out, and I told them, and I said, in that situation, you should probably box it. And he went, you never box the ball. You always catch the ball. And he started challenging me. And he says, I was taught that you never box a ball. You always catch the ball. And he literally started trying to prove to me why in goalkeeping you always have to catch the ball. And I could just sense it in his head that he'd had some coach that had been berating him, and whether it was a goalkeeper coach, whether it was a team coach or whatever in the past, that had basically kind of brainwashed him into this fear mentality of like, if I don't catch the ball, I'm wrong. And it really made me start changing my thinking about how I go about talking. And I started really rethinking how I talk to kids, and kind of like editing myself before I started talking, because kids take things so literally, Saskia, like you always said. And also you never know how they're going to, how they might misconstrue something, or something you're saying stream of conscious,
or how they might interpret it. That's why I said they're so literal. You can go from a session where you really should catch the ball there. You can catch the ball there. There's no, and maybe, and that is the truth in a certain scenario. And they might take it like, okay, I always have to catch the ball. And again, that falls on us as coaches. There is a gray area with everything, but to really have to explain what scenarios and when to use things and why. First and foremost, keep the ball out of the net. You know what I mean? But you get kids like that. I'm always saying they're so literal, and you teach them one thing and they take it into everything. That falls on the coach.
Yeah. I also think that there's an ounce of I remember as a kid, I thought everything that my parents told me and did was 100% right, and that they were never wrong. Not that I consciously thought that, I consciously thought that, but I thought these people have authority over me and they really care about me. So everything that they say and do is 100% right. Correct. And I also thought that about my goalkeeper coaches when I was at a young age, which really limited my own ability to make my own decisions. And so when someone said you always have to get the ball when it's in, they didn't give me a chance to explore that. And so now as a coach, all of our coaches on staff do a brilliant job of creating constraints to allow goalkeepers to figure it out on their own. So
absolutely
not just saying hey, get in the goal and figure out how to take a cross, but all right, let's break down that idea of you have to get everything in the 6 and make a constraint so that maybe if you catch the ball and you distribute it into that goal, you get a point. But if you drop the ball, it's no harm against you. Or if you punch the ball away, you don't get any points. So we're putting emphasis on catching, but really we're putting emphasis on if you punch it in a safe area, then you don't get scored on, right? So I think it's important for us to create that ability to allow players to explore and experiment, like I said earlier.
And it's also how they extend your range in all aspects of the position, by exploring and okay, I'm coming for everything in the 6. Not every service is going to be perfect for you to come and catch. So if it's a certain service, you have to deal with it a certain way, but failure is okay. That's how you're self-teaching as well. And that's how you're learning your range. That's how you're learning what you can handle. That's how you're learning, so if you just say to a kid, everything that comes here, you got to catch. Well, that's just not realistic, period.
Yeah.
by the way, James brought something up here. I'm not going to throw it up there because it's pretty extensive, basically. But Jill, basically, he's saying that one of his issues that he's had with goalkeeper camps in the past, in general, short-term camps, is that the players go away from the team environment and they're not really working on game scenarios. And I know obviously that's something that you're all really big at TKI, and we've had so many conversations on this podcast about getting away from camp culture, but like, what advice do you give to some young coaches out there who are wanting to put programs together and to give something different than what they're giving in their club environment that's actually beneficial, and not just doing 4 hours of movement activities because you're like, well, I don't know these goalkeepers. So
yeah, I think the biggest thing, I'm big on planning. Like, I'm a planner, and I like to have a good idea of what I'm working on and my intended outcome, because if I can be super intentional about what I want to get away from the training, then I feel like we can go back and tweak things here or there to make it better or to create a better environment. But I'm really big on planning. And I think if you want to create a more realistic game environment in training, you have to ask yourself, what moment of the match am I really working on? What am I working on? Protecting the goal? Is this working on protecting the space, or what exact moment, rather than let's work on diving, right? Because if you just work on diving, I'm sure you could do that in a way that doesn't look like the game. Whereas if you work on protecting the goal from opportunities in the half space, now that's a lot more game realistic, and it's more variable training, where you might start with that and say, hey, my goalkeeper's really struggling with kick saves. So we're going to break it. We're going to take a step back, maybe do a couple technical reps, and then go back to what we were doing before.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and one thing, Jill, I love one thing that you just said there, because the way I started, and Saskia, I don't know how you feel about this, but one thing that I started trying to do in the last few years is get out of that habit of putting sessions together based on an action, and more allowing the action to be a tool used within the scenario. So it's more like, here's an option for in this scenario for something for you to do. Now, of course, we still have to work on the physical movement. We still have to teach that movement so that kids get comfortable making those movements or whatever, but it doesn't become the forefront of the session design. And I think we still have a long ways to go as coaches in this country. I'm probably in the world and everything like that, but I think we're slowly starting to move more in that direction. And you're seeing it, I'm sure you're seeing it, Jill and Saskia, from the level of goalkeepers that you're seeing, coming into the college game and all that. So.
Yeah, I think it's a very difficult balance, because I think we were all like technique a few years ago, and now everyone switched to all game realistic. And I do think it is a blend based on the age and stage that you're working with. Like, what do they need? And we don't have to beat a dead horse with technique. If someone knows how to catch a ball, we don't have to do that 1,000 times with no game realism, right? And there are times where we do have to scale it back and do something that isn't game realistic so that we can work on a technique. And that is the beauty in coaching, in my opinion. And what might work for someone who's working with the best goalkeepers in the world, it might not work for goalkeepers that need to learn how to smother in phase 2 so that they can keep themselves safe, right? Like, yes, at the earlier stages and like the beginner stages, we want to have fun and we want to get them moving, and we want to teach them tactics that are hidden into the session without them really having to think about it that much. But there are certain techniques that we have to teach young players simply just to keep them safe, right? So I think one of the biggest mistakes in our culture in America right now is creating chaos for chaos sake. And I think that a lot of people will say, well, my session was chaotic and so it was good. And I don't think that is what necessarily makes a good session. I think having intention behind what you're trying to achieve in different moments of the game, and seeing if you can paint those pictures and allowing kids to choose what works best for them, might be a better indicator of successful training session, even if it doesn't look good, then is it chaotic,
Yeah.
I think you brought up a really good point, Jill, that Suska, I want to bring up with you too, because I know you've obviously had experience working with the little ones, during these camps and everything like that, is that you also have to take into consideration the level of development of the goalkeeper when you're looking at putting together a clinic or anything like that. If you have a bunch of rec goalkeepers, that design is going to be very different than if you have a bunch of ECNL goalkeepers, for the weekend.
Right. I mean, I agree with Jill 100%. Like you have to be able to, like, you have to be able to teach a certain amount of technique to keep the kids safe, like to make sure that they're handling their body properly, to make sure they are catching. But you can, for the younger kids, you can start with technique, and you can build that into how does this free flow into the game? How does this, okay, we're working on proper technique with whether it's diving or whatever it is, but now let's get the movement involved. Let's start incorporating into what's realistic, what's coming at you, what you're really seeing. And you can start that at a young age, but sometimes you do have to dial it back. And if it's not clicking and not going right, you might have to step back and do a couple reps of, okay, remember, this is how you handled it, this is how you want to handle this ball, or this is whether you're doing a front smother, whether you're diving and stuff, and then move it forward again in the progression and make it more game realistic. But you have to plan that. And then when you get to the older, the more experienced players, whether it's my college players and stuff like that you start more right with that. It's how are we doing? We're working on something, and shots in the half space or whatever. It's not stagnant. It is more game realistic. It is the ball pinging around, and you have to add that footwork in, like subconsciously, and movement, but then making sure their angles are right. And so it is different for different age groups, but I don't think it doesn't have to be as static for the younger kids. I mean, you could stand out there with a bunch of young kids and be like, hey, dive, hey, dive, hey, dive. Like, you know what I mean? But it's not realistic.
Right.
Like they have to understand how that is incorporated in the flow of their movement in the game. They're not just standing back there going, dive,
But so is that, Jill, do you think that's also a problem that people have when they run rec camps, is that they think, oh, these kids are so rudimentary that I have to just keep it stagnant and static, and then they're never going to be able to progress to that next level because all they're being taught is these mechanics?
First of all, I just want to say thank you to anybody who's listening to this podcast who coaches recreationally, because it's really hard. It is really hard. And like, we're talking about these younger ages and the beginning stages of goalkeeping. It is really difficult to coach that. And I genuinely believe that the best coaches should be with those age groups, because you're laying the foundation of learning for the rest of their career. So a big thing that we do is we do a lot of constraints when we work with those types of players. So for example, we have a bunch of boys that come in who are like 9 years old who just love to block. And so they block for everything. And instead of me telling them, you can't block there, I just say, okay, we're going to play a game, because all kids love to compete, right? That's an enjoyable atmosphere for most kids. They like to compete. So we'll put in the constraint of, all right, I'm going to come 1v1. If you save the ball, no points. But if you smother the ball and you distribute it to a small goal, then you get a point. And so the emphasis becomes on, well, I can only get a point if I smother, because blocking, I can't keep possession of the ball. But I might have to use blocking in this scenario if I want to keep the ball out of the back of the net. And so then, therefore, you're working, yes, of course, on some technique and keeping them safe, but you're putting the decision back in their hands, which is what we want to do. And that's how we lay the foundation of learning at a young age, instead of just telling them exactly what to do, because that's not helpful when they get older.
Exactly.
I mean, I love what you were just saying there about adding that gamification element, because I think that is something, and it takes a little bit of extra effort, right? So to put that little extra effort into being like, okay, you know what, I'm working with 8s, 9s, 10s. I have to find a way to make this engaging for them, and so maybe you can't just, just vomit a session out there. You got to put a little bit more, or time and thinking, or maybe you got to pivot in the middle of the session. But ultimately, it's going to be, if they're having more fun, they're going to get more out of it.
Yeah, and remember, you can coach in the flow. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if their technique is they're repeating something horribly, scale it back, or you can coach in the flow of it. You can stop. Okay, the save here, not proper technique, like basic technique, like not, how do we fix this and stuff. So it doesn't have to be stagnant, you like, even in what Jill just described, you can still coach in the flow. Are they if they are blocking to keep it out of the back, and that is it the proper, are they, me and the blocking, like, are they close enough to the ball? Are they so that can go in the flow of any sort of like competition game that you put together. But I love that. I love that thought process too. I'm like writing it down. I'm like, okay. I'm like, you get a point. I have to do that with my college kids right now. I'm going to be like, you get a point if you don't.
They all like to compete, right? But that's where the most fatiguing part of my job is planning. Like planning our sessions, planning 8 weeks of what are we going to do? What are we going to recall what we did on week 1 at week 2, but make it more difficult.
Right.
And I think that's the hardest part. And those constraints aren't just on the fly for us. Like we come up with what are the common errors. We know that those 9 and 10-year-old boys love to block. And so we know that's a common error in that. So we have a constraint for that. We have a progression or a regression for that. And there are times that you have to command and say, you cannot go with your feet first there, right? Because we want to keep kids safe. So we're not going to let them explore that so they hurt themselves. But there are those different situations where you do have to ask questions and probe, and hopefully that sparks for thinking on their part.
Yeah.
Jill, I have a question for you, because I think one of the problems that I think a lot of young coaches make out there is that they think that they have to run a camp because their parents keep calling. Yeah, I've gotten this. Are you running a camp this summer? Are you running a camp this Christmas? Like, what are you? When are you doing camps? When are you doing camps? When are you doing camps? And instead, and basically, you have to figure out your bandwidth too, right? You all do a good job. Like, should you still be running your ongoing and doing your camps at the same time, or should it be one or the other? Like, how do you all do it there?
I don't know. I guess it depends on what point you're at with where you feel like you can give. Our first camp that we ever did was a summer camp with 12 kids. That's all we could get. And that's all we could really provide because we were so new and so inexperienced of what we were doing. 12 kids worked. And then last summer, we had 75 kids at 3 camps, and we were sold out for months. So, and that is because we've spent the last 6-7 years developing a great team of human beings to be able to facilitate the best environment possible at TKI, and that's why we're able to expand. So for me, it's all about not how many kids you can get to go. It's about the quality of output that you can give and where you feel like you can stretch yourself a little bit, because it's not always comfortable, right? You have to take some risk in it, but you still want to make sure that you're organized enough that you can provide the best environment possible.
And I think you brought up a really good point right there. And Saskia, we've had this conversation too before about in regards to having staff. Like a lot of people, they'll try to throw this together, and then they'll just be like, it's just me, or and they've got 20, 30 kids for themselves. And then they go, oh, well, great, wonderful. I get to, I guess, keep all this money or whatever. But then it's a poor quality product, and then the parents don't come back, or then, you get a bad reputation and everything like that. And how important it is, right, Saskia, to try to find like-minded individuals and be willing to sacrifice that in order to grow this, to make it quality, so that people are going to want to come back.
Yeah, I mean, look, we can be really blunt about this. You could try to get as many kids as you want to line your pockets. Will they come back if it's just you with 30 kids and it's not quality and you haven't planned this out really well? Probably not. So, because even though it's a camp, they still want to feel seen. And I think that you really, if you're a coach out there that wants to start running clinics and wants to start running camps, you really have to see what you can actually seriously put together and to give out the best quality of coaching and personal relationship with the players that come in. It's not a machine. It's not. Then it's gonna show through if that's what you're doing.
Yeah, and I think, Jill, I mean, I think, and I'm sure you did this, but reach out to people who've run quality camps and clinics in the past before, and get advice, and and see what worked for them and what didn't work for them, before you even put something together. Because, if you're trying to do it all by yourself based on concept, it's gonna fall apart.
Yeah, and I think there's an element of you just have to try, right? But I think at the end of the day, if you keep player development at the forefront of what you're doing, you can't go wrong. I truly believe that. Like, does anybody really think that players are going to develop with 30 kids to one coach? Do you genuinely in your heart believe that? I don't think so, right? So like,
Not at all.
if you can keep like, you know what, I'm going to make these kids, I really want to create an environment where these kids can get a lot better. I think you're going to make mistakes. We all do. And I do on a daily basis. And I'm the first person to say, I want to change that because I know I can be better. And that's how you learn and grow, just like your kids, like today after our pro session, I brought the women in and I said, my bad. I thought something out. It didn't work out. My bad. And guess what? I'm a human just like they are. And that get to see the human element of like, man, I really struggled today in training. I couldn't get that. Well, guess what? I really struggled too. And I think that we also are humans and we're going to make mistakes. And I think that's okay.
Yeah, I know you got to get to another session and everything like that. But Jill, I do have a question though, because I think one thing that I've seen in the past is a lot of coaches out there, when they put a program together, they kind of want their stamp of the clinic or the camp on every session and they don't let the coaches be themselves. They try to get them to do everything their way. Is that something that you've seen in the past? How much of a detriment is that? Is that something that I know you guys are very big about encouraging your coaches to explore and to be themselves, because you have very different types of coaches.
I feel like when you always reference young coaches, you always reference me doing these things a long time ago. Like
you can reference me as a young coach. I wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I mean, like you're like, oh, for all the young coaches out there who try to control what their other coaches are doing, I'm like, oh. And like when I talk about only being technical sessions, I used to do that too. Like, and I think that we're all in a first of all, if you do that, you're not alone. There are a lot of people that do that, and you have to learn and grow. And that was something that when I started TKI, it was just me. And so I didn't have to answer to anyone. I didn't have to teach anybody the TKI method because it was just me. And so when we started to bring on other people, I felt like I have to teach you this and things have to go this way or else it's not who we are. And I was very restrictive. And I would say things like, you can't say that, you can't do that. Instead of like asking, well, what was your thought process behind that? Like there are sometimes where we have like our interns do like they run their own sessions and it can't be what they've ever done at TKI. They have to try something new. And in the beginning, I would be like, you're not allowed to do that. And then I thought, well, that's not really helping them. Like, let's have a conversation because maybe there is an element that they had a good idea from that I didn't think of, right? Because I didn't know everything. But I did make that mistake. And what I learned from that is I need to do a better job of laying out the guidelines of how we create sessions and let people have their own creativity off of that. And then we get to have more conversations about what were you thinking? How did that help? Did you get the outcome that you wanted? Can you tweak it? Can you make it better? Would you do anything different? Those types of conversations. But it is important to have the type of people that you embody your culture representing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, and I think you're bringing up a great point, and Saskia, I know we've had this conversation as we start wrapping up right here, is that you need to, because I know that when I was a young coach and I was thrown into a camp environment, I actually felt like I actually didn't grow as a coach there because I felt scared to do anything that went against what the director was telling me to do, use their specific language and wear my socks a certain way and everything. I'm not joking. Yeah. Wear my socks a certain way and everything like that. And then like, because, and so I wasn't being myself. So I feel like the kids didn't get the best sessions they could have because I was just trying to copy what, the blah, blah, blah coach, director was doing. And I think, I think I like Joe, what you said is like there has to be a methodology, but then there has to be also allow people to be themselves and work within that methodology. So I think that's
it's funny you say that about the socks, Mike, because I think the first time I had someone who was interviewing, I brought them black socks, high socks, and I said, put these on. Like if you're going to train with TKI, we wear all black. We don't wear white socks. That's gross. And wear black socks. I always get made fun of for that because I was just so like, it has to be one way. And
there's a difference between it has to be one way and just like be professional and try and have your TKI.
Oh, so. Look, I have white socks on. Like, that way. And I think that really did creep into my coaching though, because I was like, goalkeepers have to look one way. It has to be technical. It has to be aesthetically pleasing. And I definitely matured as a coach and relinquished that because, it keeps people in a box. And like you said, it creates fear. It creates so much fear. Like, I don't want to try things that are outside the box because I don't want to get punished or reprimanded or whatever.
The same thing as players. I don't want to try things outside the box.
Right.
I wish I could tell my college players what they were supposed to wear because I'm like, I basically say, how can you wear your shorts that short?
Oh, is that the new thing? Is that the new thing?
Is that the new thing? The shortest shorts in the goal, and I'm like, all right, if it works for you, but I'm like, whoa.
Oh my God. I feel 100 years old now looking at people's fashion now. It's so weird. It's all over the place.
It's funny.
Well, Jill, obviously the camps are sold out, so you don't have to plug those. So congratulations on that. That's awesome right there. As we wrap up, if you have any last kind of words of wisdom for somebody who's never run a camp before on the first thing that they should do and anything that they should watch out for. So.
No, I think if you keep player development at the forefront of your mind and you try your best, then you're going to be successful. If you care about your kids and you encourage the athletes that you get to work with, you're going to be successful. Have a plan for plan A and B, and just love on kids because that's what it's about.
Yeah.
Awesome. So if people want to connect directly with you or anybody at TKI and anything you guys got going on next year, like, are you going to be in Kansas City, by the way?
Yes, I'm presenting.
Oh, congratulations.
We will be there.
We will be there.
Wonderful. I'm still working out the kinks of what my on-field will be, but I'm presenting about principles in possession, which I'm really excited for. I've been spending 2 years on this presentation.
Oh, God. I can't wait to see it.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. All right. That's no pressure for anybody else who's doing a presentation. Working on hers for 2 years. Other people right now just opened up their laptop and they're like, all right, what is that?
They're like, oh, man.
Not for this convention, but just to develop our methodology a little bit deeper. And I've just been really passionate about how we can progress the in possession aspects of goalkeeping. And so I'm really excited to share my thoughts because I want to hear other people's input and their feedback and ways that we can make it better and we can all learn and grow.
Well, it'll be great to see you, and it'll be great to see you.
Yeah, you guys too.
Yes, I know. Yeah, we'll all get to hang out in person as opposed to on a little screen.
Yeah.
Which will be very, very nice. Hopefully in a warm convention center because I think it's mid-January in Kansas City. So
yeah,
that should be cold. So obviously, where's the best place for people to connect with you right now? Social media.
Yep, people can connect with me on social media. I am TKI Coach Jill, or you can reach out to the Keeper Institute, or you can send me an email at jloyden@thekeeperinstitute.com. And please, if you have feedback, comments, questions, please reach out. I love conversation, love trying to help people.
And James will be there. We got to meet up,
right,
James. All right, James. We honestly, guys, if you guys are going to be in Kansas City at the convention, we want to meet all our fans. We really, really, really do. We're very, very excited about it. That's one of the fun things about it, at being in convention, and we're, as some of you guys know who are insiders right now, we haven't gone formal public launch yet, but the Union Sports will also be there, and we're really excited for everybody who's part of the Union Sports goalkeeping community already. Shout out to all of you who have been joining the unionsports.com. That's a completely shameless plug right at the end of the show.
Nothing shameless about it.
Nothing shameless about it. Keep growing that community. At Goalkeeper Podcast on all social media platforms. Contact at inside18media.com if you have a guest suggestion, topic suggestion. At Saskia_Weber. Season's over, so you can DM her now. Season's over, so you can TM,
Might
you got time?
Might be over forever.
Oh, no, geez.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Hopefully not. Yeah,
The journey's getting started.
That's right. But I'll be at the convention for the first time in 30 years. That's how old I am. I will be at the convention with Union Sports, so I'm super psyched and psyched to see Jill and TKI.
Jill is a veteran of the convention, so she can be your tour guide. She can tour you around where to go, where not to go. You know, we had a situation. Jill, were you there a couple years ago in Chicago when like the boat show was taking place and everybody thought that everyone was coming in there trying to find out about the boat show? Yeah.
I was there, but I didn't know there was a boat show happening.
There was a boat show going on, and everyone just kept coming up to our booth and going like, "Excuse me, do you know like where blah blah blah?" And I'm like, "I don't know." They're like, "This is the boat show convention, right?" I'm like, "Well, you see all the soccer stuff. This is not the boat show."
I missed that one.
Yeah, I think
missed the boat on that one.
Oh.
Who's the stand-up comedian here? Come on, Mike.
Look at that.
Right by you. Whoosh.
I know. I want to try to do some shows in Kansas City, but I don't know how we're gonna have time. I know how crazy those are. Ugh. All right, guys, that's all the time on Inside the 18, and we are out. Later, guys.